Good evening. This is Pamela, and you're listening to Watchmen on the Pod. We're going to continue in our book reading The Priest, the Woman, and the Confessional by Charles Chiniquy. We are still in chapter 6, and this is part B or 2. All right. Why is it that the Irish Roman Catholic people are so irreparably degraded and clothed in rags? Why is it that the people whom God has endowed with so many noble qualities seem to be so deprived of intelligence and self respect that they glory in their own shame? Why is it that their land has been for centuries the land of bloody riots and cowardly murders? The principal cause is the enslaving of the Irish women by means of the confessional. Everyone knows that the spiritual slavery and degradation of the Irish women has no bounds. After she has been enslaved and degraded, she in turn has enslaved and degraded her husband and her sons. Ireland will be an object of pity. She will be poor, miserable, riotous, bloodthirsty, degraded, so long as she rejects Christ, to be ruled by the Father Confessor, planted in every parish by the Pope. Who has not been amazed and saddened by the downfall of France? How is it that her once so mighty armies have melted away, that her brave sons have so easily been conquered and disarmed? How is it that France, fallen powerless at the feet of her enemies, has frightened the world by the spectacle of the incredible bloody and savage follies of the Commune? Do not look for the causes of the downfall, humiliation, and untold miseries of France anywhere else than in the confessional. For centuries has not that great country obstinately rejected Christ? Has she not slaughtered or sent into exile her noblest children who wanted to follow the gospel? Has she not given her fair daughters into the hands of the confessors who have defiled and degraded them? How could woman in France teach her husband and sons to love liberty and die for it when she was herself a miserable and abject slave? How could she form her husband and sons to be the manly virtues of heroes when her mind was defiled and her heart corrupted by the priest? The French woman had unconditionally surrendered the noble and fair sight of her heart, intelligence, and womanly self respect into the hands of her confessor long before her sons surrendered their swords to the Germans at Sedan and Paris. The first unconditional surrender had brought the second. The complete moral destruction of woman by the confessor in France has been a long work. It has required centuries to bow down, break, and enslave the noble daughters of France. Yes, but those who know France know that the destruction is now as complete as it is deplorable. The downfall of woman in France and her supreme degradation through the confessional is now unfiat accompli, which nobody can deny. The highest intellects have seen and confessed it. One of the most profound thinkers of that unfortunate country, Michelet, has depicted that supreme and irretrievable degradation in a most eloquent book, The Priest, the Woman, the Family. And not a voice has been raised to deny or refute what he had to say. Those who have any knowledge of history and philosophy know very well that the moral degradation of the woman is soon followed everywhere by the moral degradation of the nation, and the moral degradation of the nation is very soon followed by the ruin and overflow. The French nation had been formed by God to be a race of giants. They were chivalrous and brave. They had bright intelligences, stout hearts, strong arms, and a mighty sword. But as the hardest granite rock yields and breaks under the drop of water which incessantly falls upon it, so that great nation had to break and fall into pieces under not the drop, but the rivers of impure waters which, for centuries, have incessantly flowed in upon it from the the pestilential fountain of the confessional. Righteousness exalteth a nation, but sin is a reproach to any people. That's in Proverbs 14, it looks like. In the sudden changes and revolutions of these latter days, France is also sharing, and the Church of Rome has received a blow there, which, though perhaps only temporary in its character, will help to awaken the people to the corruption and fraud of the priesthood. Why is it that Spain is so miserable, so weak, so poor, so foolishly and cruelly tearing her own bosom and reddening her fair valley with the blood of her own children? The principal, if not the only cause of the downfall of that great nation is the confessional. There also the confessor has defiled, degraded, enslaved women, and women in turn have defiled and degraded their husbands and sons. Women have sown broadcast over their country the seeds of that slavery, of that want of Christian honesty, justice, and self respect with which they had themselves been first imbued in the confessional. But when you see, without a single exception, the nations whose women drink the impure and poisonous waters, which not which flow from the confessional, sinking down so rapidly, do you not wonder how fast the neighboring nations who have destroyed those dens of impurity, prostitution, and abject slavery are rising up? What a marvelous contrast is before our eyes. On one side, the nations who allow women to be degraded and enslaved at the feet of her confessor, France, Spain, Romanish, Ireland, Mexico, are there fallen into the dust, bleeding, struggling, powerless, like the sparrow whose entrails are devoured by the vultures. On the other hand, see how the nations whose women go to wash their robes in the blood of the Lamb are soaring up, as on eagle's wings, in the highest regions of progress, peace, and liberty. If legislators could once understand the respect and protection they owe to women, they would soon, by stringent laws, prohibit ocular confession as contrary to good morals and the welfare of society. For though the advocates of ocular confession have succeeded to a certain extent in blinding the people and in concealing the abominations of the system under a lying mantle of holiness and religion, it is nothing than a school of impurity. I say more than that. After 25 years of hearing the confessions of the common people and of the highest classes of society, of the laymen and the priests, of the grand vicars and the bishops and the nuns, I conscientiously say before the world that the immorality of the confessional is a more dangerous and degrading nature than which we can attribute to the social evil of our great cities. The injury caused to the intelligence and to the soul in the confessional, as a general rule, is of a more dangerous nature and more irremediable because it is neither suspected nor understood by its victims. The unfortunate woman who lives an immoral life knows her profound misery. She often blushes and weeps over her degradation. She hears from every side voices which call her out of those ways of perdition. Almost at every hour of the day and night, the cry of her conscience warns against the desolation and suffering of an eternity past far away from the regions of holiness, light, and life. All those things are often so many means of grace in the hands of our merciful God to awaken the mind and to save the guilty soul. But in the confessional, the poison is administered under the name of a pure and refreshing water. The deadly blow is inflicted by a sword so well oiled that the wound is not felt. The vilest and most impure notions and thoughts in the form of questions and answers are presented and accepted as the bread of life. All the notions of modesty, purity, and womanly self respect and delicacy are set aside and forgotten to propitiate the God, small g, of Rome. In the confessional, the woman is told, and she believes, that there is no sin for her in hearing things which would make the vilest blush. No sin to say things which would make the most desperate villain on the streets of London to stagger. No sin to converse with her confessor on matters so filthy, that, if attempted in civil life, would forever exclude the perpetrator from the society of the virtuous. Yes, the soul and the intelligence defiled and destroyed in the confessional are often hopelessly defiled and destroyed. They are sinking into a complete and irretrievable perdition. For not knowing the guilt, they will not cry for mercy. Not suspecting the fatal disease that is being fostered, they will not call for the true physician. It was evidently when thinking of the unspeakable ruin of the souls of men through the wickedness culminating in the Pope's confessors that the Son of God said, "If the blind lead the blind, both shall fall into the ditch." To every woman, with very few exceptions, coming out from the feet of her confessor, the children of light may say, "I know thy works, that thou hast a name, that thou livest, but thou art dead." Revelation chapter 3. Nobody has yet been, nor ever will be, able to answer the few following lines which I addressed some years ago to Reverend Mr. Barrere, Roman Catholic Vicar General of London, Canada. With a blush on my face and regret in my heart, I confess before God and man that I have been like you, and with you through the confessional, plunged for 25 years in that bottomless sea of iniquity in which the blind priests of Rome have to swim day and night. I had to learn by heart, like you, the infamous questions which the Church of Rome forces every priest to learn. I had to put those impure, immoral questions to old and young females who were confessing their sins to me. These questions, you know it, are of such a nature that no prostitute would dare to put them to another. Those questions and the answers they elicit are so debasing that no man in London, you know it, except a priest of Rome, is sufficiently lost to every sense of shame as to put them to any woman. Yes, I was bound in conscience, as you are bound today, to put into the ears, the mind, and the imaginations, the memory, the heart, the soul of females, answering questions of such a nature, the direct and immediate tendency of which, you know it well, is to fill the minds and hearts of both the priest and female penitents with thoughts, phantoms, and temptations of such a degrading nature that I do not know any words adequate to express them. Pagan antiquity has never seen any institution more polluting than the confessional. I know nothing more corrupting than the law which forces a female to tell her thoughts, desires, and most secret feelings and actions to an unmarried priest. The confessional is a school of perdition. You may deny that before the Protestants, but you cannot deny it before me. My dear Mr. Barrere, if you call me a degraded man because I have lived 25 years in the atmosphere of the confessional, you are right. I was a degraded man, just as yourself and all the priests are today, in spite of your what is it? Denigations. If you call me a degraded man because my soul, my mind, my heart were, as your own are today, plunged into the deep waters of iniquity which flow from the confessional, I confess guilty. I was degraded, polluted by the confessional, just as you and all the priests of Rome are. It was required the whole blood of the great victim who died on Calvary for sinners to purify me. And I pray that through the same blood, you may be purified also. If the legislators knew the respect and protection they owe to women, I repeat it, they would, by the most stringent laws, prohibit ocular confession as a crime against society. Not long ago, a printer in England was sent to jail and severely punished for having published in English the questions put by the priest to the women in the confessional, and the sentence was equitable. For all who will read those questions will conclude that no girl or woman who bring her mind into contact with the contents of that book can escape from moral death. But what are the priests of Rome doing in the confessional? Do they not pass the greatest part of their time in questioning females, old and young, and hearing their answers on those very matters? If it were a crime punishable by law to present those questions in a book, is it not a crime far more punishable by law to present those very things to married and unmarried women through the oracular confession? I ask it from every man of common sense. What is the difference between a woman or a girl learning those things in a book or learning them from the lips of a man? Will not those impure, demoralizing suggestions sink more deep into their minds and impress themselves more forcibly in their memory when told to them by a man of authority speaking in the name of Almighty God than when read in a book which has no authority? I say to the legislatures of Europe and America, read for yourselves those horrible, unmentionable things, and remember that the Pope has more than 100,000 priests whose principal work is to put those very things into the intelligence and memory of the women whom they entrap into their snares. Let us suppose that each priest hears the confessions of only 5 female penitents every day, though we know that the daily average is 10. It gives the awful number of 500,000 women whom the priests of Rome have the legal right to pollute and destroy each day of the year. Legislatures of the so called Christian and civilized nations, I ask it again from you. Where is your consistency, your justice, your love of public morality when you punish so severely the man who has printed the questions put to the woman in the confessional, while you honor and let it free, often pay the men whose public and private life is spent in spreading the very same moral poison in a much more efficacious, scandalous, and shameful way under the mask of religion? The confessional is in the hands of the devil. What West Point is to the United States and Woolwich is to Great Britain, a training of army to fight and conquer the enemy. It is in the confessional that 500,000 women every day and 182 million every year are trained by the Pope in the art of fighting against God by destroying themselves and the whole world through every imaginable kind of impurity and filthiness. Once more, I request the legislators, the husbands, and the fathers in Europe, as well as in America and Australia, to read in Dens, Laguardi, de Bernis, in every theological book of Rome what their wives and their daughters have to learn in the confessional. In order to screen themselves, the priests of Rome have recourse to the following miserable superfuge. Is not the physician forced, they say, to perform certain delicate operations on women? Do you complain of this? No, you let the physicians alone. You do not abuse them in your arduous and conscientious duties. Yet, duties. Why then should you insult the physician of the soul, the confessor, and the accomplishments of his holy, though delicate, duties? I answer first, the art and science of the physician are approved and praised in many parts of the scriptures, but the art of and science of the confessor are nowhere to be found in the holy records. Oracular confession is nothing else than a most stupendous imposture. The filthy and impure questions of the confessor with the polluting answers they elicit were put among the most diabolical and forbidden actions by God Himself, the day that the Spirit of truth, holiness, and life wrote the imperishable words, let no corrupt communication proceed out of thy mouth. Wow. Ephesians chapter 4, verse 29. Secondly, the physician is not bound by a solemn oath to remain ignorant of the things which it will be his duty to examine and cure. The priest of Rome is bound by the most ridiculous and impious oath of celibacy to remain ignorant of the very things which are the daily objects of his inquiries and observations and thoughts. The priest of Rome has sworn never to taste of the fruits with which he feeds his imagination, his memory, his heart, and his soul day and night. The physician is honest in the performance of his duties, but the priest of Rome becomes, in fact, a perjured man every time he enters the confessional box. Thirdly, if a lady has a little sore on her small finger and is obliged to go to the physician for a remedy, she only has to show her little finger, allow the plaster or ointment to be applied, and all is finished. The physician never, no, never says to that lady, it is my duty to suspect that you have many other parts of your body which are sick. I am bound in conscience, under pain of death, to examine you from head to toe in order to save your precious life from those secret diseases which may kill you if they are not cured just now. Several of those diseases are of such a nature that they never dared, perhaps, to examine them with the attention they deserve, and you are hardly conscious of them. I know, madam, that this is a very painful and delicate thing for both you and me, that I should be forced to make that thorough examination of your person. However, there is no help. I am in duty bound to do it, but you have nothing to fear. I am a holy man who had made a vow of celibacy. We are alone. Neither your husband nor your father will ever know the secret infirmities I may find in you. They will never even suspect the perfect investigation I will make, and they will forever be ignorant of the remedy I will apply. Oh, has any physician ever been authorized to speak or act in this way with any of his female patients? No, never, never. But this is just the way the spiritual physician by whom the devil enslaves the corrupts women acts. When the fair, honest, and timid spiritual patient has come to her confessor to show him the little sore she has on the small finger of her soul, the confessor is bound in conscience to suspect that she has other sores, secret, shameful sores. Yes, he is bound 9 times out of 10, and he is always allowed to suppose that she does not dare to reveal them. Then he is advised by the church to induce her to let him search every corner of the heart and of the soul and inquire about all kinds of contaminations, impurities, secret, shameful, and unspeakable matters. The young priest is drilled in the diabolical art of going into the most sacred recesses of the soul and heart, almost in spite of his penitence. I could bring hundreds of theologians as witnesses to the truth of what I here say, but it is enough just now to cite three. Lest the confessor should indolently hesitate in tracing out the circumstances of any sin, let him have the following versicle of circumstances in readiness. And we're going to be quoting from who, which, were, with whom, how, why, how, and when from Liguori, and then the celebrated book of the priest, the mirror of the clergy. It is necessary that the confessor should know everything on which he has to exercise his judgment. Let him then, with wisdom and subtlety, interrogate the sinners on the sins which they may ignore or conceal through shame. The poor unprotected girl is thus thrown into the power of the priest, soul and body, to be examined on all of the sins she may ignore or which, through shame, she may conceal. On what a boundless sea of depravity the poor fragile bark is launched by the priest. Oh, what bottomless abysses of impurity she will have to pass and travel, in company with the priest alone, before he will have interrogated her on all the sins she may ignore, or which she may have concealed through shame. Who can tell the sentiments of surprise, shame, and distress a timid, honest young girl when for the first time she is initiated through those questions to infamies which are ignored even in houses of prostitution? But such is the practice, the sacred duty of the spiritual physician. Let him, the priest confessor, with wisdom and subtlety, interrogate the sinner on the sins they may ignore or conceal through shame. And I believe I'm going to stop that there, pick it up next time, and we will complete chapter 6 next time. Okay, brothers and sisters? All right. I love you all so very much. Keep your eyes on Jesus, your nose in the book, which is the Word of God, and embed the Word of God upon the tablets of your hearts so you will not sin against God or be deceived. Till next time, I love you all. Bye bye.